The morning of June 28, 1914, began with a deceivingly bright sun over the city of Sarajevo. It was a day that felt electric, with the buzz of crowds lining the Appel Quay, waiting to catch a glimpse of imperial royalty. Little did the cheering onlookers know that scattered among them were 6 young men armed with bombs and pistols. These men were not professional soldiers, but radicalized students fueled by nationalism and tuberculosis. They waited with bated breath for the motorcade that carried the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This moment was not merely an assassination attempt, but the lighting of a fuse that would detonate the entire world. Welcome to the Midnight Docket, where we investigate the day the 20th century truly began. To understand the crime, we must first understand the location and the volatile atmosphere of the time. The Balkans were known as the powder keg of Europe, a region where the interests of great empires collided with the fierce desire for independence among local populations. Sarajevo was the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which had been annexed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire just 6 years prior. This annexation outraged the Kingdom of Serbia and many Slavic nationalists living within the empire. They dreamed of a unified South Slavic state free from Austrian rule. The city itself was a blend of East and West, where minarets from the Ottoman era stood alongside the grand neoclassical buildings of the new occupiers. The target of this hatred was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He was a man often described as prickly and difficult, but he was also a reformer who wanted to grant more autonomy to the Slavic people of the empire. Ironically, his proposed reforms made him more dangerous to the extremists than a tyrant would have been. If he satisfied the Slavic population within the empire, the dream of a greater Serbia would fade away. Beside him was his wife Sophie. Their marriage was a morganatic one, meaning she was considered of lower rank and their children could not inherit the throne. This visit to Sarajevo was one of the few occasions where she could walk by his side with full royal honors. The date chosen for the visit could not have been more provocative if it had been selected by the assassins themselves. It was St. Vitus Day, or Vidovdan, a date of immense significance to the Serbian people. It marked the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, where the medieval Serbian kingdom was defeated by the Ottoman Empire. For the Serbian nationalists, seeing the Austrian Archduke parade through Sarajevo on this holy day was a supreme insult. It was viewed as a foreign conqueror, flaunting his power on the anniversary of a national tragedy. This perceived disrespect hardened the resolve of the young conspirators, who had positioned themselves along the river embankment. The group waiting to kill the Archduke was known as Young Bosnia, a revolutionary movement dominated by students. However, the weapons and training came from a shadowy organization within the Serbian military called the Black Hand. The Black Hand was led by Dragutin Dimitrijević, known by the code name Apis, who was the head of Serbian military intelligence. He believed that terror and assassination were the only ways to achieve national liberation. He had recruited 3 young Bosnians in Belgrade, including a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip. They were given 4 Browning semi-automatic pistols, 6 grenades and vials of cyanide to commit suicide after the deed was done. The security arrangements for the Archduke were appallingly lax given the known hostility in the region. There were warnings of plots and assassination attempts, yet the Archduke refused to look like he was hiding from his people. The route was published in the newspapers days in advance, giving the assassins the exact time and location to strike. There were no soldiers lining the streets, only a thin cordon of local police who were overwhelmed by the crowds. The motorcade consisted of 6 cars. The Archduke and Sophie were riding in the 3rd car, a gref and stiff double phaeton, with the top rolled down, completely exposed to the public and the attackers. As the motorcade made its way along the Appel Quay, the first two assassins lost their nerve and failed to act. One claimed a policeman was standing too close, while another simply froze. The cars continued down the Riverside Avenue, approaching the third conspirator, named Nedeljko Kabrinovic. Kabrinovic was armed with a bomb and determined to make his mark. As the royal car approached, he primed the detonator against a lamp post, making a loud cracking sound. He threw the bomb toward the open convertible. The driver saw the object flying through the air and accelerated instinctively. The bomb bounced off the folded roof of the convertible and exploded under the car following behind. The explosion was deafening, and chaos erupted on the Appel Quay. The fourth car was disabled, and several officers and bystanders were injured by the shrapnel. The Archduke remained calm despite the near miss, showing a stoic bravery that surprised his entourage. He ordered the car to stop so he could check on the injured men in the vehicle behind him. After ensuring they were being attended to, the motorcade sped up and rushed toward the town hall. In the confusion, Kabrinovic swallowed his cyanide pill and jumped into the shallow Miljacka River. However, the cyanide was old and only made him vomit, and the river was only inches deep due to a hot summer drought. Kabrinovic was dragged out of the river by the angry crowd and severely beaten before being taken into custody. Meanwhile, the Archduke arrived at the town hall clearly shaken and furious. The mayor of Sarajevo, unaware of the bombing, began his prepared speech, welcoming the Archduke to the city. Franz Ferdinand interrupted him, snapping that he came to Sarajevo on a visit and was greeted with bombs. It was a moment of surreal tension. Sophie gently calmed her husband, and he allowed the mayor to continue. Inside the town hall, a debate raged among the officials about what to do next. Some suggested canceling the rest of the visit, while others argued that military discipline must be maintained. It was decided that the program would be altered. Instead of going to the museum, as planned, the Archduke insisted on visiting the hospital to see the officers injured by the bomb. This decision was a noble one, but it would prove fatal. The security team decided that the motorcade should travel straight down the Appel Quay at high speed to avoid the crowded city center. However, in a colossal failure of communication, no one informed the drivers of the change in route. The drivers were Czech and did not speak the local language, well adding to the confusion. The Archduke and Sophie climbed back into the open car, believing the danger had passed. Meanwhile, the other assassins had dispersed, thinking the plot had failed. Gavrilo Princip was despondent. He wandered away from his post and ended up at a delicatessen named Moritz Schiller near the Latin Bridge. He was standing there, perhaps contemplating his failure, or simply buying a sandwich, as the legend goes, when fate intervened in the most tragic way possible. He heard the roar of engines. The motorcade was approaching, but instead of speeding down the Appel Quay, as the new plan dictated, the lead driver followed the original route and turned right onto Franz Joseph Street directly in front of where Princip was standing. The governor of Bosnia, who was riding in the car with the royal couple, realized the mistake immediately. He shouted at the driver that this was the wrong way and ordered him to stop and reverse. The driver slammed on the brakes, bringing the heavy Greff and Stift to a complete halt right in front of the delicatessen. The car did not have a reverse gear that was easily engaged, so the driver struggled with the gearbox. The vehicle stalled. For a few agonizing seconds, the Archduke and Sophie were sitting target stationary and exposed less than 5 feet away from Gavrilo Princip. Princip could not believe his eyes. The target he thought was gone had been delivered directly to him by a navigational error. He did not hesitate. He stepped forward, drawing his Browning FN Model 1910 pistol. He did not aim carefully as there was no time. He turned his head away as he fired 2 shots into the car. The first bullet passed through the door of the vehicle and struck Sophie in the abdomen, severing her gastric artery. The second bullet hit the Archduke in the neck, piercing his jugular vein and lodging in his spine. The shots were quiet, almost like the popping of corks. At first it appeared that the assassin had missed. The Archduke sat upright, and Sophie remained by his side. The governor thought the shots had gone wide. But then he saw a stream of blood shooting from the mouth of the Archduke. Sophie cried out to her husband, asking what was wrong, before she collapsed onto his lap. The Archduke pleaded with her, in a voice that was rapidly fading. He begged her not to die and to live for their children. His attendants tried to open his coat to find the wound, but his uniform was fitted so tightly that they had to cut it open. By the time they realized the severity of the injury, it was too late. Gavrilo Princip tried to turn the gun on himself, but was swarmed by the crowd and the police. The pistol was knocked from his hand. He managed to swallow his vial of cyanide, but like his accomplice before him, it only made him violently ill. The police and the bystanders beat him savagely. He was dragged away to the police station, bloodied and bruised, but alive. Back at the governor residence, the medical team fought to save the Archduke and his wife. Sophie died first from internal bleeding. Franz Ferdinand followed her minutes later. The time was 11 in the morning. The assassination was complete. The news of the assassination spread through Sarajevo like wildfire. Riots broke out almost immediately. Anti-Serbian violence erupted across the city as angry mobs attacked Serbian-owned shops and businesses. The police did little to stop the destruction, and in some cases encouraged it. The Austro-Hungarian authorities declared martial law. They began a massive roundup of suspects, arresting hundreds of prominent Serbs. The investigation into the assassination moved quickly. Princip and Kabranovic were interrogated, and while they tried to protect their accomplices, the police soon uncovered the wider network. Under harsh interrogation, the young assassins revealed the involvement of the Black Hand and the supply chain from Belgrade. This was the smoking gun that Austria-Hungary needed. They had long been looking for a reason to crush Serbia and eliminate the threat of Slavic nationalism on their border. The assassination provided the perfect casus belli. However, the diplomatic machinery of Europe was complex. Austria-Hungary could not attack Serbia without the backing of their powerful ally Germany. They sent an envoy to Berlin to ascertain if they would have support for military action. This led to the infamous blank check. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, horrified by the murder of his friend, the Archduke pledged his unconditional support to Austria-Hungary. He urged them to take swift and firm action against Serbia. With this assurance, Austria-Hungary prepared an ultimatum. It was designed to be rejected. The terms were so harsh that no sovereign nation could accept them without losing its independence. They demanded that Austrian officials be allowed to enter Serbia to conduct their own investigation and suppress anti-Austrian propaganda. Serbia was given 48 hours to accept the ultimatum. The Serbian government, desperate to avoid war, agreed to almost all the terms, except the one that allowed Austrian police to operate on Serbian soil. They offered to submit that point to international arbitration. It was a conciliatory response that surprised the international community. However, Austria-Hungary was not interested in peace. They declared the Serbian response unsatisfactory. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The first shells were fired on Belgrade the next day. The declaration of war set off a chain reaction among the great powers of Europe, who were bound together by a web of alliances. Russia, the protector of the Slavic people, began to mobilize its massive army to support Serbia. Germany, seeing the Russian mobilization as a direct threat, declared war on Russia on August 1st. France, which was allied with Russia, then mobilized its forces. Germany declared war on France on August 3rd. The German plan for war involved invading neutral Belgium to bypass the French defenses. This violation of Belgian neutrality brought the British Empire into the conflict on August 4th. Within a matter of weeks, a local dispute in the Balkans had exploded into a general European war. The great armies of the continent marched to the front lines, cheered on by enthusiastic crowds who believed the war would be over by Christmas. They had no idea of the horrors that awaited them. The machine guns, the barbed wire, the poison gas, and the trenches would claim millions of lives. The assassination in Sarajevo was the spark, but the pile of dry timber had been building for decades through imperialism, militarism, and secret alliances. As for the assassins, their fate was sealed, but not in the way one might expect. Under Austro-Hungarian law, the death penalty could not be applied to anyone under the age of 20. Gavrilo Princip was 19 years old at the time of the crime, falling just short of the age limit. While several older conspirators were executed by hanging, Princip was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was sent to the fortress prison of their Sienstadt, in what is now the Czech Republic. The conditions were horrific. He was kept in solitary confinement, often in chains, and in total darkness. Princip was already suffering from tuberculosis before he went to prison, and the damp, cold conditions of his cell accelerated the disease. He withered away in his cell as the war he started raged outside. His arm had to be amputated due to tuberculosis of the bone. He died on April 28, 1918, weighing less than 90 pounds. He never lived to see the end of the war or the creation of Yugoslavia, the unified Slavic state he had dreamed of. He was buried in an unmarked grave, but a sympathetic guard sketched a map of the location, allowing his remains to be recovered later. The legacy of that sunny Sunday in Sarajevo is immeasurable. The First World War led to the collapse of four great empires: the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian. It redrew the map of the world and set the stage for the Second World War, the Cold War, and the conflicts in the Middle East that continue to this day. The car in which the Archduke died is still on display in a museum in Vienna, along with his blood-stained uniform. They stand as silent witnesses to the moment when the old world died. Historians often debate whether the war would have happened without the assassination. Some argue that the tensions were so high that any spark would have ignited the conflict. Others believe that if the driver had not made that wrong turn, the 20th century would have looked very different. It is a chilling reminder of how fragile peace can be, and how the actions of a single individual can alter the destiny of billions. The story of Franz Ferdinand and Gavrilo Princip is not just a history lesson, it is a warning about the unpredictable nature of human events. Today, a plaque marks the spot on the corner of the street where Princip stood. For decades, he was celebrated as a hero of national liberation in Yugoslavia. His footprints were even cast in concrete on the pavement. However, after the breakup of Yugoslavia and the Bosnian War in the 1990s, his legacy became more divisive. To some, he remains a freedom fighter, while to others, he is a terrorist who brought ruin to his country. The Latin Bridge remains a place of pilgrimage for historians and tourists alike, drawn by the dark gravity of the site. The mystery of the Black Hand and the extent of the Serbian government involvement remains a topic of research. Did the Prime Minister of Serbia know about the plot? Did he try to stop it? There are documents suggesting that a vague warning was sent to Vienna, but it was lost in bureaucratic channels. The truth is buried in archives that have been purged and rewritten over the last century. What remains is the narrative of a preventable tragedy, a comedy of errors that resulted in a catastrophe of biblical proportions. We must also consider the victims. Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were real people with a family who loved them. Their 3 children were left orphans in an instant. They were stripped of their royal privileges and properties after the war, living in exile. The human cost of the assassination extends far beyond the political consequences. It serves as a reminder that political violence always leaves a trail of personal grief that is often overshadowed by the grand sweep of history. As we look back at the events of 1914, we are left with the question of inevitability. Was the Great War destined to happen, or was it a specific set of circumstances that could have been avoided? The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand serves as the ultimate case study in the chaos theory of history. A sandwich, a wrong turn, a stalled engine. These trivial details combine to create a perfect storm. It challenges us to look at our own world and wonder what small sparks are currently flickering, waiting to ignite the next great conflagration. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past on the Midnight Docket. The story of the assassination is a complex web of conspiracy, luck, and tragedy. It is a puzzle that historians are still piecing together more than a century later. We hope this investigation has shed new light on the spark that burned the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, greatest unsolved mysteries, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Until next time, keep asking questions, and remember that history is never as simple as it seems.